Hello RP fam, welcome back and thank you for tuning in for another video. We are getting ready for the divisional round of the playoffs and I want to prepare you with my divisional round power rankings. I'm going to be ranking the remaining 8 teams based on what we have seen from them lately and of course over the course of the regular season. Now I am going to be weighing the more recent stuff more because it matters what you have done for me lately. It is the NFL after all. I have all these teams broken down into tiers as well to give you guys a better idea of how I see these matchups playing out and how I think these teams stack up. So before we get into that and all the fun, please consider first of all liking the video. That helps keep Relentless Press moving forward and is greatly appreciated. Subscribing to the channel as well helps a lot. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers and you can join us for the journey if you have not hit that button. To all of my current subscribers, thank you guys for all of the support. Could not, would not do it without you. With that done, let's hop right into it. I am starting at 8 and working my way to what I believe is the number 1 team. The worst team left in these playoffs for me are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, they're just happy to be here at this point and even more stoked that they were able to get a playoff win over what has been a really mediocre season for the BUCS. Now, do not get it twisted. Baker Mayfield has surprised and he's done better than I think basically everyone expected, and he deserves his props and a new contract. But Tampa Bay overall is just going to be overpowered, I think, in this game against Detroit. They did face the Lions back in week 6 at home and lost 20-6. In that game, Jared Goff went nuclear, 353, a pair of touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 catches, 120 plus, and a score. I think that's probably going to happen against the BUCS again here. This secondary has gotten a little bit better, especially with that back end and Antoine Winfield Jr. But outside of that, there are not a ton of things that the Lions are going to have to worry about as far as being on offense, getting shut down by this BUCS team. Tampa Bay is going to have to run the ball and control some of the clock to try to keep Detroit off their heels and their offense off of the field, but that has not been something that Tampa has done successfully for almost the entirety of the year, which means it's basically going to be Baker Mayfield on his own trying to carry the heavy load and keep Tampa in it, and I just think that's too much to ask, especially with the injuries that Baker is still dealing with. The BUCS are the only team that I have in the D tier, mostly because they were lucky to make the playoffs in the worst division in football, and then they got a layup of a matchup last week against an Eagles team that embarrassed themselves and didn't even want to show up to the playoffs whatsoever. Into my C tier now, and I have just 2 teams here. They're both very young with great quarterbacks at the controls. We start at number 7 with the Green Bay Packers. This should be, at worst, a learning experience for this Green Bay team. Came in last week as the youngest in the playoffs, and many thought that that meant that the Packers had no shot. I included because of how dominant the Cowboys had been. However, with Green Bay playing at the level they are right now, and especially Jordan Love, it's really hard to bet against Green Bay as good as San Francisco is. It would not surprise me if the Packers keep this game close, but it also wouldn't surprise me if the 49ers, with all of that rest, absolutely shellac them, because the Packers defense has been abysmal for basically the entire season, last week against the Cowboys notwithstanding. We talked about Jordan Love. He is basically the hottest quarterback in the NFL. We'll talk about the other one who might be at this point, but he is in the top 3 as far as playing the best football over the course of the last couple of months. Something like a 21 touchdown to 1 pick ratio as the Packers have clawed their way into the divisional round. This meetup with San Francisco is an NFL record 10th between these 2 teams in the playoffs, which I think is significant. Really cool to kind of get a new lease on these teams. They have been so good in the past couple of decades. Now the Packers are going to have to lean on Love because I don't expect their running game to be able to do much against San Francisco. Even though Aaron Jones was great last week, this 49ers defense, especially against the run, is a different animal. If the Packers want a chance, it's going to have to once again be Love throwing for 300 plus and not making mistakes. I don't see it, but I didn't see anything like what happened last week happening either. I don't think you can count out Green Bay and just completely discount them. In at number 6 is my favorite quarterback in the NFL right now, and probably the hottest in the league as well. It is the Houston Texans, led by CJ Stroud at 6. This is going to be a very interesting game against Baltimore. Let's talk about what I like from Houston. Obviously, CJ Stroud has been the be-all, do-all for that team, and Nico Collins has been his main target. Dalton Schultz has also played a huge part in this offense, and I expect them to lean on those two targets. Devin Singletary out of the backfield has to turn it up and give CJ Stroud and this Texans team at least a little bit of support. It is going to be really hard to run on Baltimore, but they cannot just completely discount this running game and forget about it and become one-dimensional. Stroud is good enough, I think he's shown that at this point, to carry this team, and it would not surprise me if the Texans can keep this game close, but I think ultimately Baltimore ends up pulling away. There is just too much of a talent difference between what Baltimore brings and what Houston has. That being said, the Texans are one of the hottest teams in the league, and when a quarterback is playing at the level Stroud is, you can never count them out. Texans are also probably going to struggle defending the pass. Their secondary has not been great this season, although it has gotten better over the course of the last couple of games. We saw a pair of pick sixes last week. I doubt they do that against Lamar, but it does give a little hope for Houston faithful. And the Texans, which I think is important and maybe is not talked about enough, they did play this Baltimore team earlier in the regular season. Now, it was week 1, but the Texans defense does get that advantage because they've seen him. It is not the first time they're going to be playing against Lamar, and I think DeMeco Ryans is going to be able to come up with some ways to confuse him and maybe make life a little bit more difficult for Baltimore. If the Texans can continue to stop the run, which they've been one of the top 5 teams in the NFL thus far at being able to do that, and they make Baltimore one-dimensional, then life gets a little more difficult on Lamar Jackson. Maybe he makes some mistakes and the Texans can win that way. I don't foresee it happening, but there is a path for the Texans to win this game. I think there are enough pieces on this team, and I really like what Houston has put together, especially with such a young group of core players. Now to my B tier. These are teams that I believe have a legitimate shot at hosting the Lombardi. Starting in my top 5, rounding it out are the Buffalo Bills. This team I absolutely love, but injuries have caused me to bump them down a little bit. So many players banged up. The Bills might be without 3 starting corners in this game. Stephon Diggs wasn't practicing. Gabe Davis wasn't practicing. A lot of injuries for Buffalo, unfortunately, and that might cost them. Now, that being said, the Bills have a history against Kansas City, which everybody knows about, and they have dominated the Chiefs in the regular season. In 4 matchups in the regular season, they're holding Kansas City to under 21 points a game, and they're forcing more than 2 turnovers per game, which is in line with Buffalo has done all season. They forced the 2nd most turnovers in the NFL this year. We know that the Chiefs have struggled in the turnover battle, and if the Bills are going to upset the Chiefs, even though they're favored in Buffalo, I think that they do that by causing Patrick Mahomes issues, making him make mistakes, and then capitalizing on them. Of course, we know about Josh Allen. He is going to carry this team just like he did last week when he went for 277 total yards and 4 total touchdowns. But I don't think he needs to be that Superman in this game against the Chiefs for the Bills to be able to win it. They have to lean on that defense and get stops in the red zone. Kansas City is famously bad in the red zone this season, and then they need to limit turnovers. Josh Allen, when he's been able to protect the football, is damn near unstoppable. They're going to lean on the run game a little bit, and I really hope that it's more than that. If James Cook can get going against a beatable Kansas City front seven, that is going to take a lot of pressure off of Josh Allen, which I think that he needs, because this is easily the biggest game of his career. The Bills defense needs to get pressure. If they can force turnovers and make Mahomes uncomfortable, that is the real path to victory for them. And then, of course, they need to hope that the NFL isn't super protective of their most valuable asset and they call a fair game. I think the path is going to be hard for the Bills, but at home it is certainly not impossible. That brings me to my fourth ranked team, which is the Detroit Lions. I love a lot of what Detroit has done this season, and they are going to need to continue to lean on the running game in this one. I know that Tampa Bay has been elite at run stopping this season, but Detroit is so much better when they can set up play action, when they can lean on that running game and then give Goff easy throws to complete with run after the catch ability. That is their path to success here, and they need to stay consistent with it. If they could just decide to go back and air it out, I think Goff could get himself into trouble, which we have seen in multiple games this year. With David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs back there, I don't think that is an issue. We talked a little bit about how Goff and St. Brown lit up this BUCS secondary in their first meeting. I expect that to happen again. Sam Laporta is probably going to be more involved as he gets further and further away from that injury. We saw Craig Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, some other wide receivers step up in the past. They're going to need a third option against the BUCS who might bring more defense and coverage over to St. Brown's side, especially with Antoine Winfield Jr., the Pro Bowler, back there. The Lions' secondary is atrocious, and they're probably going to struggle against Tampa Bay at least a little bit in this game. It is going to come down to Aiden Hutchinson and that front seven getting pressure for the Lions. Hutchinson's on a 3-game multi-sack streak, and he also had a 33% pass rush win rate last week in the wild card round. That was twice as good as his regular season numbers. If he can get pressure that quickly, it is going to be a nightmare to stop for Tampa Bay, and really I believe he is the X factor in this game. Let's get to my top three. This is the last team that I have in the B tier. And at 3, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, it was an impressive victory that they pulled off last week, notwithstanding all of the questionable calls that went the Chiefs' way. They were dominant on defense, as they've been this entire season. They've been a top 3 team in points per game allowed. Where they've struggled is in that running unit. They are going to have to be able to slow down Detroit and make sure that they get some clock control, because if the Lions are able to continually pound the rock for first downs, keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, then that is nothing but trouble for Kansas City. The Chiefs are going to lean on Rashee Rice, Isaiah Pacheco, and probably Travis Kelce again here, although Kelce had 3 drops last week and looked, I would say, above average, being kind. Pacheco has been a monster in the playoffs thus far, and he usually is. He did the same thing last year. When it gets cold, it is very hard to tackle that beast, and I think that the Bills could struggle to slow him down. Rashee Rice is looking more and more like an alpha as the weeks go by, and although I don't believe he's a top 25 wide receiver yet, there is certainly a trajectory where he can get there before the end of the season, and he will continue to be Patrick Mahomes' go-to candidate because he's pretty much the only one at this point that Mahomes can trust. As for Patrick Mahomes, he's been basically average at best as far as his lofty standards are concerned for most of the year. Now, he has elevated in the playoffs his entire career, so there's no reason to think that he's going to stop that trend. But if you don't believe that Mahomes simply hits the button and goes into playoff mode immediately, I don't really blame you. The Chiefs have a couple paths to success, but most importantly, I believe, is forcing turnovers for the Bills, which could be trouble because that is not something that the Chiefs have done successfully this year. They rank 27th in the NFL in forcing turnovers. That's out of 32 teams, so not very good. If the turnover battle is won by Buffalo or breaks even, I really like the Bills' chances. Kansas City, however, has the ultimate equalizer. That is, the NFL wants to protect their investment, and they made it very clear that they would basically do whatever they could within reason to do that last week. Free helmet swap, no holding calls on that offensive line, questionable grounding calls, the list goes on. And that's why I have the Chiefs at 3 here, if I'm being honest, because although that defense has played great, Mahomes has been okay, and their weapons have been fine, but not over the top. The thing is, it is hard to beat a team when everything is tilted in your favor, and the NFL has made it clear that they are going to do whatever they can to try to boost ratings and keep Mahomes and all of his commercials on the field and on your television sets. All right, enough of that. Let's get to my top 2, which have not changed since last week. At 2, in my A tier, are the San Francisco 49ers. This team has won 5 straight home playoff games, which is the longest active streak in the NFL. They have been impressive almost the entirety of the season, with a couple losses here and there. It's the NFL, those things happen, but I think San Francisco is going to be very hard to beat this week. They are fully rested. They have health basically across the board. There is not much that has been able to slow down this team when those things have been the case. What are you going to stop if you are a defense? If you try to shut down the running game, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk will kill you with yard after the catch and kill you over the top. If you focus on stopping that passing attack, then McCaffrey has a ton of room to roam, and he is one of the most dangerous players in the NFL when that is the case. Now, the defense, that has been elite as well. Number 2 scoring defense. They get to the quarterback. They force turnovers as well. Get off the field on 3rd down. This 49ers defense is well coached and has elite players every single key position. There are no weaknesses on this team except maybe the quarterback. And that is going to be the biggest question mark. Can a team in this playoff run in the NFC put the 49ers on their heels and make them play catch up? Because if that is the case, and we see what Brock Purdy has looked like when that has happened, they are gettable. If not, if San Francisco can just roll and get a lead and get after the quarterback and pin their ears back, this 49ers team is making a run all the way to the Super Bowl. To my first team, and the only one that I have in the S tier, and I don't understand how anyone can have it any different. This is the Baltimore Ravens spot for many reasons. Baltimore has dominated basically every good team that they've played this year. I think they're 6-2 against playoff teams, and they have smashed the number 2 team on my list and the one that most people thought was the league's best for the entirety of the season. The Ravens embarrassed the 49ers just 4 weeks ago in week 13. So for anyone to have anyone other than Baltimore at the top seems asinine at best. The Ravens have not allowed a 300-yard passer since 2022. They are a top 10 play-action team as far as efficiency is concerned. And Houston is bottom 5 in QBR, completion percentage, and yards per attempt against play action. That means that Lamar Jackson is going to be able to basically do what he wants when he wants, and as long as he takes care of the football, it's going to be hard for this Ravens team to lose. They have the number 1 defense in the NFL as far as scoring is concerned, and they have an excellent group of veterans on that back end that make life difficult for opposing quarterbacks. That running game for Baltimore has been and probably will always be there as long as Jackson is back there, but it really hasn't mattered who's been the back. Ravens have found success on the ground. As far as the air is concerned, getting Mark Andrews back would be huge, but even if they don't, Isaiah Likely has emerged. Zay Flowers is looking like an excellent first-round pick. There are a lot of weapons in this Ravens offense, and Lamar Jackson has been able to spread it around and utilize them successfully. There are not a lot of things that can slow up this Ravens team, and that is why I have them as the number 1 team in these playoffs. And with that, I will call it a day. end a video. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's content. Click the like button if you did. Subscribe to the channel so that Relentless Press can get to that 1,000 sub barrier. Would greatly appreciate it. Make sure you hit notifications so you do not miss any content that Relentless Press is bringing you. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and I will see you next time.